The most popular video I've posted on my channel so far has been a historical analysis on Black Ops 6, which honestly makes a lot of sense seeing as Call of Duty is the third highest selling video game franchise of all time, but for me personally it's pretty ironic. Growing up, my mother wouldn't let me play M for mature games, so for better or worse, I missed out on Call of Duty lobbies when I was in elementary school.
The question is, radical left, will you shut up, man? Who is on your list, Joe? Why didn't you do it over the last 25 years? Because you were president.
But by the time I could experience them, COD's reputation was in serious decline after approaching and surpassing a decade of yearly releases. So I spent far more time back in the day playing 2K and eventually Fortnite. However, all of that changed with the Modern Warfare remake at the end of 2019.
Get up here now.
Secure.
After replaying the campaign over and over again, as well as eventually putting hundreds of hours into Warzone during quarantine, I quickly developed a new obsession with tactical shooters. However, I was incredibly disappointed to find out that there were barely any options on consoles. Yeah, there was Siege, and you can even include Battlefield, but I really wanted to try out some of the more realistic options, like Squad, Insurgency, Escape from Tarkov, and more. The realistic shooter genre was one of, if not the main reasons why I initially bought a PC in the first place, but there was just one small problem. Most games in this genre lacked a single-player option, and without any friends who shared my interest, I would rather die than be forced to communicate with strangers by myself. So despite always having a deep appreciation for realistic shooters, I have yet to play one in my 4 years of owning a PC. Until now. When I was recording footage for my last video, I took a look at the PlayStation Store, and to my surprise, I found out Ready or Not was finally getting a console release. This game was first announced all the way back in 2017, and after it launched in early access in December of 2021, its own publisher ended its partnership with the developers just 3 days later. This also coincided with public controversy surrounding one of the game's levels, which had players responding to an active shooter situation at a college campus. I'm not too sure if this was the first level in Ready or Not to receive public scrutiny, but what I do know is that it was far from the last. For those who don't know, Ready or Not is a realistic and tactical SWAT game that attempts to faithfully recreate all aspects of the job. Some have labeled this game as cop propaganda, but I don't think that's necessarily fair, because instead of handing out speeding tickets or arresting people for simple drug possession, the majority of the game's levels have players engaging with some of the worst aspects of modern society. That alone doesn't mean this game can't be propaganda for law enforcement, but with that being said, the officer you play as and the ones you are surrounded by don't have any characterization at all. They aren't portrayed as heroes or even humans. They are way more like robots who are just doing their job, and their circumstances are not glorified either. Each mission in the game is aiming for an unsettling amount of realism that properly conveys the emotional weight of these real-life scenarios. Ready or Not does not hold back in the slightest, choosing to faithfully depict all of its subject matter through a grounded and unsanitized lens. It's clear that the developers did their research and due diligence in order to respectfully recreate events and locations that some of us may be all too familiar with, including but not limited to drug-infested communities, mass shootings, human trafficking, pedophilia, cult and religious extremism, child abuse, and much more. The game has garnered a cult-like fanbase who has passionately supported Void Interactive's vision for years. However, for the console release, the developers were forced to censor some of the game's content, and to date this might be the biggest controversy that the game has faced.
What? It's just an ordinary crabby. Oh my goodness!
Thousands have quickly turned on the game, as more than 17,000 negative reviews have been left on Steam within the past month alone. You would think that the game has removed entire levels or completely reworked some of its darker subject matter, but all in all, the censorship is not that drastic. The game no longer has male and female nudity, which I think the majority of people are fine with. You can no longer dismember and mutilate NPC bodies after they die, and although this is kinda stupid seeing as games like Red Dead Redemption 2 had this feature, again, it's not that big of a deal. The biggest alteration that was publicly announced was the changed animation for the third mission in the game. In Twisted Nerve, players are sent into a poor and run-down community where they will conduct a home raid to shut down a meth lab. On top of either arresting or taking down the suspects, as well as detaining civilians, players will end up walking to a child's bedroom where you will find a girl convulsing next to a used needle. It's obviously a disturbing sight, but it's an authentic and respectful depiction of something that 100% has occurred in real life. However, for the console release, Void Interactive has changed this scene. Now, when the player walks into the bedroom, the child will just be sleeping on her side, and the used needle is removed. It's by no means a major change. You can still assume that the child has had awful experiences as she's grown up in a rundown environment surrounded by meth users, but still, I can understand why people wouldn't want this moment to be altered. Prior to July 15th, the release date for the console port, most upset fans were completely overreacting to the changes that the developers were forced to make. I understand why some think any form of censorship can be bad, but that doesn't mean that people should be attacking the developers over it. Void Interactive has spent more than 8 years developing a grounded and dark depiction of the absolute worst that society has to offer. If they could have it their way, I'm sure that they would try to make this game even more depressing than it already is, but it's clear that if they wanted a console release, they had to play ball with Sony and Microsoft. However, in the middle of me writing the script, players have found additional moments of censorship that the developers did not publicly disclose. Valley of the Dolls is the 10th mission featured in Ready or Not, meaning that if you're playing the game from the first time, this is when the second half truly begins. Up until this point, most of the moments in the game have been pretty tame. Yeah, you see and uncover some pretty disturbing things like the child's bedroom that I mentioned earlier, and there's also a few missions where you go after people who either possess or facilitate explicit images of minors, but all in all, the first 9 missions are just a warm-up for what's to come. In this operation, players perform a raid on a multi-million-dollar mansion owned by a very successful pornographic director. From the jump, the mission is very off-putting as you find the director is hosting an 18th birthday party for his daughter, and as you make your way through the home, you discover that this is clearly an inappropriate environment for a child to grow up in. But the worst is saved for the end of the mission, and I don't want to spoil too much for the players who haven't experienced it yet because it's truly a horrifying and jaw-dropping moment. It's also especially relevant considering that politicians from around the world are actively trying to cover up the largest child trafficking ring that we've ever been made aware of. It's one of the many moments that Ready or Not players remember vividly, and it's a huge turning point in the game that leads to an even darker second half. However, it seems like Void Interactive has also censored this scene too, and I don't think that they announced this one publicly before the console release. Now, fitting with the title of the mission, images of children have now been replaced with images of dolls, and while still creepy, it does drastically change the emotional weight present at the end of the level. That's where I do understand the frustration of some fans because now we all have to wonder what other changes were made in secret. Ultimately, none of these alterations drastically change the Ready or Not experience. It's still one of the most mature and realistic games ever made, and as of now, it may be the darkest game that has ever been released for consoles. Yeah, I know, Manhunt and other older games were pretty dark too, but none of them are as tactical and realistic both in its gameplay and visuals like Ready or Not. Most of, if not all of the emotional and shocking moments have had their dramatic punch preserved, and it's a game that I cannot recommend more. It's become a trend in my past few videos that whatever game I'm covering ends up becoming one of my all-time favorites, and fortunately, Ready or Not continues that trend. I began the video talking about the 2019 Modern Warfare reboot and my admiration for tactical, realistic shooters that followed, because Ready or Not is one of the few within the genre that has a genuinely worthwhile single-player experience. When you load up a new game for the first time, Ready or Not will introduce Commander Mode, the single-player experience where you will have access to the same missions and content as the multiplayer mode, but now with the added feature of managing a team of officers, both during missions and off the job. However, Ready or Not has a second single-player mode which is called Quick Play. For all intents and purposes, Quick Play is a nearly identical experience to Commander Mode, but they each have their own unique differences. In simple terms, Quick Play is an easier and more convenient option, whereas Commander Mode is more hardcore. Both allow you to control and direct your own SWAT team, but in Commander Mode, you have the additional responsibility of maintaining the morale of your unit. Depending on how successful or unsuccessful you are in your mission, your squad mate's mood will change over time. If their morale increases, they give your unit certain perks and buffs for missions, like making it so that you and your squad mates always kick down a door on your first attempt. Meanwhile, if their morale goes down, I haven't really noticed any major side effects, even as their mood tanked when I constantly failed missions over and over again. Commander Mode is more difficult only because you can't restart the mission at any point even after you die, meaning that if you fail, you are sent back to the police station where you have to load up the operation all over again. Meanwhile, Quick Play allows you to restart whenever, including after you die, meaning you can quickly reload the mission instead of going through several different loading screens. This doesn't make the moment-to-moment gameplay any easier, but it's definitely quicker and more convenient. Quick Play also lacks the morale system for your team of AI officers, but other than that, these two modes are identical. You still function as the leader of a SWAT team, and the main gimmick of the single player mode is the ability to order your officers to do anything you would want them to do. It's an incredibly detailed system, and overall, using it is pretty simple considering all the different options you're given. You can order them to arrest suspects, clear out different rooms, move to different locations, and so on. The basics that you would expect from any commander role. However, the highlight of this function is the different ways you can command your officers to breach doors. It's so incredibly detailed. You can have them split the stack on a door or bunch up on one side or the other. If the door is unlocked, you can have them breach and clear normally, or if the door is locked, you can tell them to open it either by lockpicking, kicking it down, placing a charge, or using a battering ram. Then, once the door is finally open, you can have them move in right away or throw different types of grenades to stun or kill enemies. There's even more detailed commands beyond that, and you can even split your squad into separate teams and have them clear out different rooms or perform different functions at the same time. The AI for your teammates isn't perfect, but they are easily some of the smartest AI companions that I've ever interacted with. Ready or Not is a genuinely difficult experience, and if you want to make it through alive, you have to use them to your advantage. If you attempt to clear every level by going in head first, you're gonna have a bad time with the game. In fact, they're so competent that after you die, you can literally sit back and watch as they clear the rest of the level without you. Speaking of levels, I've alluded to it earlier, but there are 18 different missions in the main game, and each one is distinct and unique to give the game plenty of variety. I've already mentioned a few already, but there are even more that take inspiration from real-life events. Like the highly controversial nightclub level, which is clearly inspired by the Pulse nightclub shooting that occurred in Orlando nearly a decade ago. There's also a mission where you have to take out a group of terrorists that are spread out across an entire floor of an apartment building, which reminded me a lot of the 2017 Las Vegas shooting. There's even a level that is directly inspired by the Ruby Ridge incident as well. Other than that, most of the missions in Ready or Not are not directly tied to real-world events, with many missions taking you to single-family homes, the US-Mexico border, a large-scale hospital, a post office, coastal port, and more. Additionally, there's 3 separate DLCs which add on another 8 levels on top of the base game, leading to a grand total of 26 levels in Ready or Not. Each one is highly detailed, and at least on PC, the graphics are top tier outside of some of the weaker NPC character models. But I do want to give Void Interactive the props. Each level feels incredibly real and lived in, and it helps a lot that each level will have its own unique set of suspects and civilians, meaning that you will almost never see the same NPC twice. Each time you load up a restart level in Ready or Not, the spawn location of suspects and civilians will be randomized, making no 2 runs feel the exact same. From the very start of the tutorial, Ready or Not places a huge emphasis on doing things by the book and taking in as many suspects alive as you can. However, that's a lot easier said than done, as suspects can often be sporadic in their behavior, and even civilians for some reason will refuse to cooperate most of the time.
Get down! Hands on your head, now! Police, down on the ground! Hands up above your head! Hands up! Down on your get down on your knees!
Ready or Not has a scoring system for each mission, which will track things such as evidence gathered, friendly fire, unlawful use of force, and so on. The only possible way to achieve a perfect score is to bring in every single suspect alive, which, like I've already stated, is incredibly daunting. The game gives you plenty of non-lethal options like a beanbag shotgun, a taser, pepper spray, flashbangs, and more, but believe me, you are definitely going to use your guns to kill some people. Out of every single aspect in Ready or Not, the gunplay has to be the most addictive part of it all. Firearms feel incredibly powerful both for you and the bad guys, as all it takes is just one well-placed bullet to take anyone down, including your squad mates. Movement feels both tight and fluid, with the ability to pull off some pretty insane angles with the leaning mechanics. But I do have to say that I played this game on mouse and keyboard, the 2 things that this game was originally designed for. Those who played on console, go ahead and let me know what you think about the controls, because I'm genuinely curious to know how this game plays on the controller. But for the most part, that's about all that Ready or Not has to offer. If you stayed all the way until the end, thank you so much for watching. If you're not already, please consider subscribing. I have a lot of cool and big ideas and works for future videos that I promise you won't want to miss out on.